The telephone on Johnny Carson's desk rang. He stopped mid-joke. And when he answered, his mother's voice took away every word he'd ever known. It was March 1981. The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson. Studio 6B in Burbank. Tuesday night. Johnny was in the middle of his opening monologue. Something about the weather, a political joke, the kind of effortless comedy that had made him the undisputed king of late-night television for 19 years. The audience was laughing. Ed McMahon was chuckling at his desk beside Johnny. Doc Severinsen and the band were ready for their cue. Everything was running like clockwork. Perfect television. Perfect routine. And then the telephone rang. Not the phone in the production booth. Not a phone backstage. The vintage rotary telephone that sat on Johnny's desk as a prop, a cream-colored relic from another era that had never, in 19 years of broadcasting, actually rung during a live show. Until tonight. The ring cut through Johnny's punchline. He stopped mid-sentence, his smile freezing on his face. The audience's laughter faltered, confused. Ed turned toward the desk, his eyebrows raised. The phone rang again. Loud. Insistent. Impossible. Johnny stared at it like it had materialized from another dimension. His hand moved toward the receiver, hesitated, then picked it up slowly. Hello? His voice carried uncertainty, confusion, the tone of someone who didn't understand what was happening. The voice on the other end was quiet, frail, but unmistakable. Hello, son. Johnny's face drained of all color. His mouth opened but no sound came out. His eyes went wide with shock, then filled instantly with tears. His free hand gripped the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles went white. Ed leaned forward, concern flooding his features. Johnny? What? Johnny held up one finger. Wait. His entire body rigid, the receiver pressed against his ear. Carson stopped mid-monologue. The entire studio froze. The control room erupted into chaos. Director Bobby Quinn was shouting into his headset. What's happening? Did someone patch a call through? Who authorized this? Do we cut? Do we stay on him? Producer Fred DeCordova stood behind Bobby, staring at the monitor showing Johnny's face, that expression of complete devastation. Keep rolling, Fred said quietly. Don't you dare cut away. On stage, Johnny hadn't moved. He sat frozen behind his desk, the phone receiver trembling in his hand, his face a mask of shock and grief and something else, something the audience couldn't quite identify. Mom? He whispered, his voice cracking, barely audible over the studio microphones but caught perfectly nonetheless. Is that really you? The studio audience, 300 people who had come expecting comedy and celebrity interviews, sat in stunned silence. Something was happening. Something real. Something that transcended the familiar rhythms of late-night television. Ed McMahon, Johnny's closest friend and longtime sidekick, sat perfectly still, his jovial expression gone, replaced by deep concern. He'd never seen Johnny like this. Not once in nearly 20 years of working together. Johnny listened to whatever the voice on the phone was saying. His jaw clenched. A tear rolled down his cheek. Then another. Johnny Carson, who maintained perfect composure through every interview, every sketch, who never broke character, who was the consummate professional, was crying on live television. I know, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I know. I'm sorry I haven't. I'm sorry it's been so long. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 32 years earlier. Johnny Carson wasn't always Johnny Carson, beloved television icon. In 1949, he was a 23-year-old kid from Norfolk, Nebraska, fresh out of the Navy, trying to figure out what to do with his life. He'd studied radio and speech in college before the war. He was funny, quick-witted, ambitious. But he was also broke and living in his parents' house, wondering if he'd ever amount to anything. His mother, Ruth Carson, was a difficult woman. Not warm, not demonstrative, not the kind of mother who hugged easily or said, I love you, without prompting. She was practical, stern, focused on respectability and proper behavior. She'd grown up during the Depression, raised 3 boys through hardship, and believed that showing too much emotion was a sign of weakness. She and Johnny had a complicated relationship. He desperately wanted her approval. She rarely gave it. When he told her he wanted to pursue a career in radio and television, she'd been skeptical. "It's not a real job, John," she'd said, using his given name with that tone of disapproval he knew so well. "You need something stable. Something dependable." But Johnny pursued it anyway. He got a job at a radio station in Omaha. Then moved to Los Angeles to try television. Got small gigs, writing jokes, hosting local shows, doing whatever work he could find. He sent letters home. Called occasionally. But the conversations with his mother were always strained, awkward, full of unspoken disappointment. When he got hired to host a game show in 1955, he called to tell her. "That's nice, dear," she'd said, her voice flat. "But game shows don't last. You should have a backup plan." When he started hosting The Tonight Show in 1962, the biggest break of his career, the job that would make him a household name, he called her again. "I'm very happy for you, John," she'd said. "Try not to let it go to your head." Over the years, as Johnny became more successful, the distance between them grew. Not geographic distance. He could afford to fly her out to California anytime. Emotional distance. The kind that builds between a son desperate for validation and a mother who doesn't know how to give it. They spoke maybe 3 or 4 times a year. Stilted phone calls on holidays. Johnny sending money, sending gifts, trying to bridge a gap that seemed unbridgeable. Ruth would thank him politely, ask about his health, make small talk about the weather in Nebraska, and then say she had to go. Johnny buried himself in work. 3 shows a week, later 5 shows a week. Monologues and sketches and celebrity interviews. He became America's favorite late-night companion, the man who made millions laugh before they went to sleep. But he couldn't make his mother laugh. Couldn't make her proud. Couldn't break through that wall of Midwestern stoicism to the warmth he knew, he hoped, existed underneath. The last time they'd spoken was Christmas 1980. 4 months ago. A brief, awkward phone call. "Merry Christmas, Mom." "Merry Christmas, John." "Thank you for the check." 10 minutes of small talk. Then goodbye. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Now, in March 1981, Ruth Carson's voice was coming through that impossible telephone on Johnny's desk, live on The Tonight Show, and Johnny couldn't understand how or why, but he knew, somehow he knew, that this was the last time. "How are you calling me right now?" Johnny asked, his voice steadier now but still thick with emotion. "Mom, where are you?" Ruth's voice was quiet, tired. "I'm in the hospital, honey. In Omaha. They're taking very good care of me." Johnny's face crumpled. "What hospital? What's wrong? Why didn't anyone call me?" "I didn't want to worry you," Ruth said, and there was something in her voice Johnny had never heard before, softness, vulnerability, the armor finally cracking. "You're so busy with your show. I didn't want to be a burden." "A burden?" Johnny's voice broke completely. "Mom, you're not. You could never." He stopped, unable to finish. Ed McMahon had tears streaming down his face now, not even trying to hide them. The band members sat motionless, instruments resting in their laps. The audience was crying, strangers witnessing something intimate and heartbreaking and achingly real. The control room had gone silent. Every technician, every camera operator, every person involved in producing The Tonight Show understood they were witnessing something that transcended television. "I wanted to tell you something," Ruth continued, her voice growing weaker. "I should have said it years ago. Decades ago. But I didn't know how." "Tell me what, Mom?" There was a long pause. Johnny waited, the receiver pressed against his ear, his other hand still gripping the desk. "I'm proud of you, John," Ruth said, and her voice cracked on his name. I've always been proud of you. I just didn't. I didn't know how to say it. My mother never said it to me, and I didn't know how to say it to you. But I've watched your show every single night for 19 years. Every single night. And I'm so proud of the man you became. Johnny broke. Completely, utterly broke. He put his head in his hand, the receiver still at his ear, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Tears streamed down his face. The most famous man in late-night television, crying like a child on live TV. Backstage, he made a choice no producer would have ever allowed. The commercial break was scheduled in 90 seconds. Protocol said to thank the caller, wrap it up, move on. Keep the show running smoothly. But Johnny didn't care about protocol. He looked directly at camera one, tears still streaming down his face. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, his voice raw and breaking. I need a minute here. We're going to take a break. But I need you to understand something first. He turned back to the phone, then back to the camera. Making a decision. This is my mother, he said to millions of viewers across America. Ruth Carson. From Norfolk, Nebraska. And I haven't told her often enough. I haven't told her at all, really, how much she means to me. How much I love her. How much I wish. He stopped, composing himself. How much I wish I'd been a better son. You've been a wonderful son. Ruth's voice came through, quiet but audible through the receiver. I just didn't tell you enough. I didn't know how. Johnny wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Mom, I'm going to come see you. First thing tomorrow. I'm going to cancel everything and I'm going to get on a plane and... John, you don't have to. I want to. Johnny interrupted, his voice firm despite the tears. I need to. Please. Let me. There was another pause. Then Ruth's voice, softer than Johnny had ever heard it. I'd like that very much, honey. But this was the moment no one in the studio, nor anyone at home, ever saw coming. Johnny stood up from behind his desk. Not the casual standing he did sometimes during jokes. This was deliberate, purposeful. He picked up the telephone, the entire unit, bass and receiver, and carried it with him as he walked out from behind the desk towards center stage. The audience gasped. Camera operators scrambled to follow him. No one knew what he was doing. Johnny sat down on the edge of the stage, right at the front, his legs dangling over the edge like a kid sitting on a dock. The phone cord stretched behind him, barely reaching. He held the receiver. With both hands now, like it was something precious and fragile. Mom, he said, his voice quiet but carrying through the studio. I want you to hear something. He looked at the audience, 300 strangers who had come for laughs and were getting something far more profound. Can you help me? Johnny asked them, his voice breaking. Can you tell my mom that she raised someone who made a difference? That she should be proud? The audience rose as one. Standing ovation. Not the excited applause of entertainment, but something deeper, the sound of people honoring a moment of raw vulnerability and honesty. They clapped and cried and some of them called out, We love you, Johnny. Thank you, Mrs. Carson. Johnny held the receiver close and listened to the applause wash over the phone. Do you hear that, Mom? That's for you. Because you raised someone who learned to care about people. Even if I learned it the hard way. Ruth's voice came through, barely a whisper now, thick with tears she'd held back for decades. I hear it, honey. And I love you. I should have said it more. But I love you so much. I love you too, Mom, Johnny said, and for the first time in his adult life, saying those words to her felt easy. Natural. Right. The phone went quiet. Not disconnected, just quiet. Ruth was still there. Johnny sat on that stage holding the receiver for another 30 seconds, then gently placed it back in its cradle. He looked at the audience, tears still streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Johnny flew to Omaha the next morning. He spent 3 days at his mother's bedside. She died peacefully on the 4th day, holding his hand. At her funeral, Johnny gave a eulogy where he talked about that phone call. How she'd found a way, even at the end, to tell him what she'd never been able to say in person. The telephone never rang again during a Tonight Show taping. But Johnny kept it on his desk until his final broadcast in 1992. A reminder that it's never too late to say what needs to be said.